let's talk about what's shoved down people's throats, okay? Literally. What's shoved down people's throats are bullets in Club Q, are fists in the face of transgender people.
So a couple of libertarian-ish guys talking about pronouns. I wanted to do this one for a while. Ari Armstrong, good friend for a long time. Help us out with this. First of all, columnist, Complete Colorado, Pickaxe Colorado on Substack. Substack is awesome, by the way. I find the best stuff on Substack. Is it paid or complimentary or both at this point?
I put all my stuff up but not with a paywall. People can pay money if they want, but you just sign up for email for free, and then you get the emails, which is how Substack is very flexible in that way.
Still doing Patreon?
That's kind of phased out for me.
You're still wealthy, though.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
By global historical standards, I am the top 1%, John.
So I wrote a column a while back, and this has been a pet peeve of mine, and it's the gender thing. I believe there are two sexes. I got fired from the Denver Post because I said there are two sexes. And when I say there are two sexes, I mean there's a man and a woman. Specifically, there's an XX and an XY chromosome. I understand very rarely there's a deviation from that. I'm not saying there aren't people who think or identify elseways, but when I hear that my daughter goes to school in middle school and has to get up and give her preferred pronouns in 4th grade, I really start to get twitchy about this stuff. I find it really different than gay and lesbian issues, which I'm very supportive of. I've got friends who have trans kids, and they go through a lot of issues with that. I try to be sensitive to it, but I'm sorry, I just can't get there. So I wrote this column about it, and as a libertarian, you said, Kildare is wrong. I love this, but you don't seem to understand. I'm infallible. So you're obviously wrong. So give me your best shot. Where am I wrong on this?
Well, first of all, kudos for taking criticism on this and for discussing this. I don't know if you know this, but Complete Colorado linked to my Pickaxe article in which I was criticizing you for that. And actually, most of my readers for that article came from Complete Colorado, which is ostensibly your site in some respect, where I'm a columnist, by the way, but I did not write the critical column. For you, I wrote it for my own site. So I appreciate the fact that you're willing to talk about this and take criticism for this.
To be honest, it's hard to find people who want to discuss this.
I found that too, frankly.
And it really bothers me because this is everywhere, and I can't have a discussion about it. And when I try to, I just get called a bigot, and then it runs away. And I'm trying to figure this one out. So thank you for having the conversation.
Well, I want to back up for just a minute and try to explain maybe why we're coming at this from different angles.
Yeah.
I think more than me, you are straddling the conservative Christian line and the libertarian line. And I'm coming more from a straight secular libertarian position. So I was heavily influenced by Ayn Rand, and I'm more of a secular free market guy.
Me too.
And so, yeah, so we have a lot of similarities, but you're more, I'll put it this way, you talk a lot more to conservative Christians than I do, and that's part of your coalition with the Independence Institute. And so, for example, one of the most famous libertarians in the world is Deirdre McCloskey, who's a transgender woman, and one of the most important theorists on topics of progress and innovation in the world. And so she wrote the books like Bourgeois Virtues and related works on that line. So one of the most important libertarians in the world. Ayn Rand has this great line. She actually said some negative things about homosexuals, gay people. But she has this great line in Atlas Shrugged where Dagny is having a discussion with her sister-in-law, and her sister-in-law says, well, I'm the woman in the family now. And Dagny shoots back, that's okay, I'm the man in the family. And she's the great railroad tycoon. So Ayn Rand has a lot, her feminine heroes are very traditionally masculine in the 1950s sense, right? They're the ones running the railroads, running the businesses, very assertive individuals. And so I think that there's just this difference in perspective, and that I'm coming from a straight secular libertarian free market position. And I think that that makes me more open to this idea of transgenderism being an okay thing.
See, no,
So,
I think you're reading me completely wrong in that
okay,
um, I don't look at it that way at all. I look at it completely scientifically or biologically. You can call it a penis versus a vagina or a X versus Y. That uh, if if somebody is born with a penis, I'll put that into the male category, or with a vagina, I'll put it to the female category. Or more specifically, you can wipe that out and say if there's an X chromosome or a Y chromosome, we'll make one male, one female, and that's pretty much it. I understand there are some really rare, and I do mean very rare, differences, and there's some real rare chromosomal abnormalities. And fine, we'll put those in a very different one. Beyond that, there are people who are male who identify differently, and the people with an XX chromosome who go in a different category because they feel differently. It's like saying, this man is gay. He wants to have sex with other men. Yeah, he's a man who has sexual desires this way, but he's still a man.
well,
And but scientifically, biologically, the dude is still a dude. That has nothing to do with any Christian values. I'm not a Christian. So
yeah, but the dude looks like a lady.
yeah, but the dude can look like
No,
a lady.
I want to start with the common ground,
Yeah.
and then get into the criticism.
All right.
Because here's the common ground, and I think that there is some errors in some aspects of, quote, queer theory on this point. At the biological level, as you say, almost all human beings come out of the womb with well-developed male or female genitalia. You have
And
testicles,
chromosomes.
you have a testicles in a penis, or you have a vagina, ovaries, uterus. And there's other things that go along with that. Now,
Including chromosomes.
like you say, there are some rare exceptions where there's some mixed genitalia coming out.
Right.
So we are a sexually dimorphic species, as are other primates. And in fact, in some primates, the differences are even much greater. So the males might be several times as large as the females, not just slightly larger on average as with human beings. And so yes, there's different chromosomes. And there's also a lot of more subtle differences here in terms of, and especially once puberty kicks in, most males get washed with more testosterone than most females, and this causes more muscle growth.
You don't got to talk to me. I'm Italian. I know about too much testosterone.
More facial hair. There's all kinds of subtle differences beyond the strict genitalia. So you're right in that sense. We're a sexually dimorphic species. I regard this as basic biology.
Well, then stop there for a second. I want to put a pin in it right there for a second. That's all I'm saying, is that there are men and there are women. All right, at some point, there are two sexes. And throughout all species on Earth, there seems to be, in all mammals, two sexes with two sets of chromosomes. There are male chromosomes, there are female chromosomes, X's and Y's, and that's it. And yeah, there might be all sorts of variations in how people identify. There might be more testosterone, there might be less testosterone. There might be more effeminate men, there might be less effeminate men. There might be all sorts of differences in how people feel. Great. There might be biological changes in how they are. Fine. But there's still only men and women.
Now, notice you corrected yourself. You went from all species to mammals. Now, if you do look at all species, for most of human history, right, there was no such thing as sex. There was no sexual reproduction. Bacteria don't reproduce sexually. So you're only getting to sexual reproduction with more advanced organisms. And many species, in fact, change their sex over the course of their life. So if you look at all of life more general, you're getting an extraordinary amount of variation. You're getting you're getting even complex species that can still reproduce asexually at times. You can get species that can change from male to female and back.
I don't know.
But let's stick to humans, okay?
I think it's good to stick to humans.
So, as noted, we are a sexually dimorphic species, with some exceptions, okay? We're talking about averages here. But I think here's the basic mistake you're making. You're basically conflating sex with gender. You're conflating biological sex with expressed or preferred gender. And those are different things. So what does it mean to have a gender on top of being a male? Does that mean anything? Now, there's also a lot of tension in queer theory based on what little I know about it. Now, let me just note right here. There's something comical about two cisgender straight white men discussing transgenderism on your show
First of all,
and other related issues.
how long ago was it that you even knew you were cisgendered? When did the term cisgendered even come up?
Right, and some of these are relatively new terms, like within my lifetime. So it was only 2 years before I was born, 1969, when police raided the Stonewall Inn in New York.
Right.
And so within my lifetime, there has been just brutal police oppression of gay people.
Yep.
And it's basically been since that era, since the gay rights era, when you get this broader queer theory and these additional terms like transgender, cisgender, right? So yeah, granted.
Let's stop there for a second. Let me back up. I am fascinated by the gay movement. What we have seen in my lifetime through political change from Stonewall to now has been amazing. And I use that as a model for political change. From something where, from an illegal activity to a celebration of life to the point where, oh my God, it's...
and protected by the Supreme Court.
Not only protected by the Supreme Court and now Congress, but something that would get you jailed now is celebrated in every quarter and has pride flags. Whereas before you can be a gun owner here, now being a gun owner will get you thrown in jail in the city where I live. It's amazing how you could be gay here and thrown in jail. Now you be a smoker and that'll get you thrown in jail, even though 5% of the population is gay or less, but 20% of the population still smokes, and now you're the pervert for being a smoker. It really is amazing how the cultural switch has happened for people's lifestyles. Getting back to it though, I support that movement. This has been amazing to see how that switch has happened. That's spectacular. But the language used in the gay movement is not incorrect, and it's not been coerced. That a homosexual man is still a homosexual man. So I can look at somebody, I can look at my homosexual friend who says, yes, I am gay. And I look at him, I go, yes, you are gay. And we go about our lives. Whereas a man who says, I am a woman, and I look at him and I say, no, you are not a woman. And somehow I'm a terrible person for stating what I believe is a fact. And he looks at it and says, no, you're the terrible person.
I think it's pretty widely known that our terms typically have multiple definitions, right? This is why we have definition 1, definition 2, definition 3.
There's a difference today.
So
the difference today is people are losing their jobs and people aren't allowed to speak what they believe is truth.
Well, let me just make the basic point here.
Go ahead.
So woman in some contexts refers to your biological sex. You have the female genitalia, and often people associate a particular gender orientation with that biological sex. Okay, but there's a second definition of woman, which is your gender expression. So woman too, it doesn't mean like you don't just wish away your penis, right? That's not what happens. Nobody thinks that. Nobody thinks that the biology becomes irrelevant. However, it's reasonable to think, and I think that there's something real about an expressed gender. So, and I think that there is a relationship between that and the gay movement. It wasn't that long ago when if somebody said, I'm gay, the reaction, the widespread cultural reaction was, oh yeah, he's gay, that's fine. Go live your life as a gay man or a lesbian woman, and that we're perfectly fine with that. No, it was, there's something wrong with you. You are perverted, you're lying, there's something mentally wrong with you, you have some mental illness, we need to fix you and make you not gay, because there's no such thing as authentic gayness, according to the critics. This was not that long ago, and in fact, I heard this kind of thing when I was a kid. And a lot of people still say things like that, right? This is still with us today. People say, well, there's no such thing as an authentic gay man or authentic lesbian woman. There's something mentally wrong with them. And I think that the same thing is happening with transgenderism. And I think this gets to the heart of the problem with the pronouns. You're essentially saying that there is no such thing as transgenderism. If somebody claims that they're a transgender woman or a transgender man, such as one of our state representatives, who is, by the way, one of the most hardworking, best representatives in the state legislature, smartest, you are basically saying, I don't believe you when you say you're transgender. I think you're either lying, or you're delusional, or you're mentally ill, or there's something just wrong with you. There's no authentic transgenderism. So I think that's the problem with the pronouns. When you say, I'm not going to recognize if your preferred pronouns, you're essentially
what
saying.
You're saying, no, what you're doing is you're devaluing what I'm saying. It's just the opposite. So when somebody says, I am a woman, and I look at that person, I go, no, you're a dude. You are obviously a dude. Because biologically, you're a dude. You have stolen a word that I look at you and you're a dude. Because we've already established right up front that the word first definition was a dual word. It was either this or that. What did you say? A whatever word that men and women, we are a
Dimorphic.
Dimorphic, thank you. That it's a dimorphic species. So for hundreds of thousands of years in the species, we're either men or women. So the word has always been used as the biology, X or Y. And I like the chromosomal. And if you look at the columns I've written over the years, I've always said, fine, then as we have this document when you're born, this record when we're born, and we identify you with what we can identify you with, you're either an X or a Y, this is a governmental record. Well, then that record shows what you are. And we look at you and identify you from what all of us see as an X or a Y. Now, when I look at you, let me go through this, and I say, no, you're obviously a Y. I'm sorry, you're a dude. You are definitely a dude. And you say, no, I am a woman. And I go, no, you're a dude. By forcing me to express what you consider your gender is, you're telling me what words I can use. I find that highly offensive, that in my world, you are devaluing my value structure, you're devaluing my words, that I need to now conform to what your reality is so that you feel like a woman. Maybe it is what you truly believe, maybe because society has taught you this, maybe because you believe it. I look at what kids have been taught in schools, and you've seen some of the cases that we've brought on the show of what people believe they feel. I've heard of the cases of kids who believe that they're lions or other animals. My son, who has Down syndrome, often believes he's a race car, and he truly believes he's a race car. I go along with it. Now, you can believe whatever you want to believe. No one's going to say he's a race car. But I have the right to express how I see the world the way I do. And just because you wish to be called something does not legally oblige me to call you that. And now we live in a world that if I do not call what I believe to be completely a guy, and by the way, I'm willing to say you are a guy who identifies as a woman. That's it. You are a guy who identifies as a woman. I will never say you're a woman because obviously you're not a woman. And for me to think that we have now changed the law for you to go backward in time and change legal documents, like you've changing an address form or birth certificate to say that you're now a woman, you're changing reality. If we are a dimorphic race and you were born a dude, now we're changing legal documents? For me, this is dangerous stuff beyond just taking away my right of free speech.
So there's a lot of issues on the table here, okay? But let's use the race car example. What you're saying is that saying that you're a transgender woman or a transgender man is the equivalent of saying you're a race car. It's just totally, you're just delusional. That's the position on the table. And I'm saying, no, there's a difference
from a biological point of view, yes, it is delusional if we're talking about biology. You
This
said
is the
we're
point,
saying
though. Gender is not about biology. When we're talking, so let's talk.
You said the first definition is dimorphic. You started this conversation saying the first definition
but we got to look at the
is
second definition too.
yeah, but from the
Okay.
first definition,
Okay, I want to
It
bracket
is.
this idea. I was going to talk about force, so let's bracket that and talk about this. Try to talk about this straight on, okay?
but from
When
the
we
first
talk about
definition,
gender,
it is.
when we talk about gender, we're not just talking about genitalia. We are
Since
talking about
when?
psychology
All right, but
and
since
behavior.
when? But what's happened here is
Okay, so let me give you an
you've
example.
stolen the very first, and from what I've ever known, the only definition, a biological, scientific definition. So I keep
wanna point
hearing,
something
I
out here.
keep
This is-
hearing, I keep hearing, all this. Follow the science, follow the science, follow the science, and then it comes to global warming. It was like science, science, science. And then when it comes to this, it's like F the science. We're going to go with something that's not science. It's feelings and psychology and something mushy. All I know is your chromosomes are XX or XY.
So, in preparation for this show, yesterday I read a book called Queer: A Graphic History. And the reason I read that particular book is that book is being attacked in Douglas County for being in the school library. So I thought, well, I want to see, is this really appropriate for children? And is it a good book? And the answer is to both questions is yes. It's a great book. I recommend it. I would recommend that you read it and the viewers read it. But one of the things that struck me in that book is that there's actually a tension between certain transgender activists and certain queer theory activists. And the tension is this: if you're transgender, you are saying that gender matters and that gender means something. Whereas a lot of, or at least let me say, some queer activists are trying to say, wait a minute, I'm trying to question the entire concept of gender and say the entire thing is at best a social construct. And there's no real meaning to it. And it's purely performative. Like your gender is only what you choose to, it's like a performance. It's all like play acting. There's nothing deeply rooted about it. So I'm going to make a provocative claim here, is that you are more similar to certain queer theorists than do certain conservatives, because you're basically saying gender is meaningless. There's nothing about gender on top of biological sex that means anything. It's purely social construct. It's purely performative. So think about that. You have more in common with certain queer theorists than you do with certain transgender activists on that score. I am taking the more conservative approach, that there is something real about gender that transgenderism is capturing. So on top of the biological sex.
Maybe I'm just remarkably stupid then, because I'm saying either you have a or you don't have it.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. And so you might call it dimorphic. I'm calling it biology or science. I'm calling it chromosomes. That
let me
either
ask you
have
this
it. So
question.
when I wrote the column, the one that got me fired, the last straw at the Denver Post, mind you, I'm a ridiculously politically incorrect guy. I use bad words, and I'm rough around the edges. But for me, physical reality is physical reality. Chromosomal reality is chromosomal reality. And in that column, I was very careful. I did not use the word gender. I never said there were two genders. I made it very clear there were two sexes. And on a driver's license, there's male or female. And there are those, you're either male or female. That's it.
So you're basically saying gender doesn't exist.
If you want to put it that way, fine. Gender doesn't exist. I don't care if you're feminine or masculine. I don't care. It doesn't matter. There are boys, there are girls. If girls want to run around in pants and boys want to run around in dresses, I don't care. If you want to raise your girls to take testosterone and have mustaches, fine, but they're still girls. That
I want to drop back and make it. I want to make kind of a.
You cannot change their chromosomes, and so to lie to me is wrong. But what's even more evil is to force me to lie, and tell me that in order to keep my job, or to stay in a college, that I have to look at a man and say, I'm going to call that man her. Or even worse, I have to lie and also use bad English and say there are two of them and say they are her when there's only one of them. I can't do
Well,
that.
I'm going to raise another topic, but I want to get back to
Yeah.
force here, okay? So my idea is that we should just quit. Ideally, we would just quit using gendered pronouns. I agree with you. They is a problem because it's plural and singular. And to me, not always, but in some contexts, that's confusing. So I would prefer that we just go with one set of pronouns for everybody, because in normal discussion, it doesn't matter. For me, somebody else's gender or sex doesn't make any difference. It only makes a difference if I want to go on a date or something like that, right?
But it does matter because
let's
it does
talk
matter
about,
because we come from an evolutionary world where we come from boys
if I'm
and girls.
hiring somebody, does it matter if they're a woman or a man? No, it doesn't. Doesn't make any difference. If you're hiring somebody to work at the Independence Institute,
I tell you what,
are you going to hire somebody because they're a man or a woman? No, it doesn't make any difference. So why does the pronouns make? Why do we put? Why do the pronouns make it such a big deal?
Go to any Spanish-speaking country where every table or drink is masculine or feminine, because that's part of the culture. That's just the way evolution has happened.
Okay, but this table is not a male. Okay.
Yes.
I don't even. Is it? So
it's either L table or La table.
But this is what there's a lot of. I don't think you're quite getting to the subtlety of the problems here. You're saying gendered language. What does that mean? Let's call this table a man. That doesn't mean anything, right? That is purely a product of the language.
Really? Is a ship?
But let's go back to
a ship a boy or a girl?
But we're not. Even if we do change the pronouns eventually, that's not where we're at now. Okay?
Every saxophone is a girl.
What about now? This use. I think that you're misusing the term force in this context. No one is forcing you to use. No one is forcing you. Your relationship with the Denver Post was a contractual relationship.
Oh, no worry. I'm not talking about me.
That is the key idea.
I am not talking about me. I am talking about public schools. I am talking about people who have real jobs, not me at the Denver Post. That's a made-up job. I am talking about people who work for a living, who have to stand up at a meeting and say, my pronouns are he, him, hers, or whatever the hell, who rather not. There are people in the world of Dilbert living in cubicles who have to feed their families, who have to put up with this crap.
So now not only are you a queer theorist, but you're a Marxist who says that people are being oppressed because of their place of employment. John, the core theory of libertarianism, free market ideology, is that people should be free to, people should be free to voluntarily interact, consensually interact.
So my kids who have to go to school because it's compelled to go to school in Colorado, and who have to stand up and say, my preferred pronouns are this, this, and this, are free to go to another school? No, they're not. Or the speech codes at CSU where you cannot say so many things.
Well, these are public.
Good God. No, we're living in a society where this stuff is shoved down people's throats, and you know it.
Let's talk about what's shoved down people's throats, okay? Literally. What's shoved down people's throats are bullets in Club Q, are fists in the face of transgender people. So let's not get too uptight about having to say he and her to write a column. And by the way, you remain one of the most popular commentators in Colorado, right? This idea that you've been canceled is...
I'm not crying.
All right.
Let me make it very clear.
But let's talk about the real problem here is not people being oppressed because they have to say he or her in certain contexts. The real problem here is extraordinary bigotry against transgender people, LGBTQ people, violence, actual physical violence against LGBTQ people, extraordinary levels of discrimination, extraordinary levels of hate speech against these people, such that you have people in Colorado, pastors in Colorado churches, accusing all LGBTQ people of being groomers, of saying they should be dragged behind cars to death. You have lawyers celebrating the fact, her belief that Club Q people are burning in hell after they get murdered. This is the real problem here, John, on the table. This idea that people are being, even if you grant that people are being oppressed because of the pronouns, the level of oppression for that versus the level of oppression that is still today being faced by LGBTQ people is like 1,000 to 1, of that magnitude.
There has never been a time in history American history or elsewhere, where it has been more celebrated, more protected to be part of the LGBTQIA plus crowd than it is today, where we have members in the legislature, where we have a governor, where we have people in major sports and acting and society, where we have people everywhere who are part of this community, where flying the flag is everywhere. Do we have crazy ass people saying crazy ass shit? Yes, always, always, always. That does not excuse taking away people's right to free speech.
So-
what surprises me, Ari, is that a hardcore libertarian like you wouldn't be the first to stand up and say that pressuring people and chilling people's right to free speech and saying that that pressuring somebody to use pronouns against their free will is somehow right. That if someone believes and wants to identify as someone of an opposite gender, yeah, more power to them. Honestly, more power to them. If someone believes or identifies that they're a lion or a woman or a race car or whatever, more power to them, because that's what we believe in. This is your right, and go for it.
So
But that doesn't mean that I'm obliged, or I should be pressured, or good God, I should be shamed if I don't go along with it.
So look, so here's, I think, an important libertarian or free market insight that a lot of people miss. When you're talking about these institutions, you're talking about government institutions as well as private institutions.
Government institutions that we're paying money
I
to
concede. And so
propagandize society, that we have to use the pronouns that
So I look
want.
at this much differently than do progressives and conservatives, because both of those groups take these government institutions for granted. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, why exactly is government running these things? Why exactly is government even running the schools? So I'm taking a much more radical position here underneath, right?
Yeah, but they are.
But let's talk about private businesses, okay? No one thinks that you should be able to say anything you want as an employee of a business without getting fired. You go into a business and start calling all your black colleagues the N-word, you're going to get fired on the spot. And that is right. If I ran a business and you come in and started calling my black employees the N-word, I would say, get the hell out of here right now. And so would you. If somebody came into the Independence Institute as an employee and they started calling your black guests the N-word and saying, oh, black people don't have the same intelligence as white people and you're an N-word, you would say, get the hell out now. I know you would. So when we talk about free speech, we have to talk about these consensual relationships.
Are you equating?
Yes, I am. I'm saying if
you're saying that me refusing to call some guy and address her with the N-word, that is obscene.
Okay, if you have Breonna Tattone, who was a state representative, who's a transgender woman, into the Independence Institute to present some bill or whatever, and you have another guest saying, who's heckling her and saying, you're a man, you're not really, you're delusional or whatever, you're a groomer.
Yes, that would be.
You better ask that person to leave.
Of course I would ask that person to leave, because
that's
that
what
would
I'm
be
saying.
That would be inappropriate. He's not talking to that person, but to refer to
this free speech does not mean you can say whatever you want in whatever context.
Right,
free speech
but to refer
means
to refer to that person as a man is not wrong. So if there's a black man there and to say that man is the N-word, yes, that's wrong. But to say that man is black is not wrong. To say that Breonna Tattone is also a man is not wrong.
It is wrong.
You said we're a dimorphic race. Is she biologically a man?
That's because man.
Is she biologically male?
She has a biological sex
Is she
of
biologically male?
Born with biological male.
She's a man. Biologically, is she man?
This is where you're missing the point.
It's a yes or no. Is she biologically man?
in terms of the biological
Is she
genitalia-
biologically a man?
Yes, but you are
Yes.
missing the second.
So if I say she's a man, that's not calling her the N-word,
I am
is it?
agreeing with you on the first definition of man,
So-
but you are missing the second. The second
So
definition
it's
of
not
man
calling
has
her
to do
the N-word, is it?
when she says that she's
It's
a
not
woman. When
calling
I
her
say
an
that
N-word.
Brianna Tatone is a woman, I'm not talking about
That's
her
why it's obscene
genitalia.
for you to say that if I refer to her as a man, that I'm referring to her as the N-word. That's why it would be obscene.
I am absolutely saying that it is morally equivalent
to calling her the
because
N-word.
you are ignoring the second definition of man, which refers to gender and gender expression, not whether you have
Do
a
you
dick or a
find-
vagina.
You see,
Okay.
I find that calling the N-word to
But
me.
so here,
You understand that? And I mean all the respect in the world to Brianna. You're right. She's a hardworking, fine representative. I disagree with her on all sorts of issues. But you understand this by you telling me that by me saying exactly the obvious, the dimorphic obvious, that by saying that this person is male, just like that person is black, I've now said the N-word? How offensive is that to me? You have just called me a KKK racist bigot for saying this table is made out of wood. How is that possible when you've just logically said at the beginning of the conversation, we are dimorphic? Biologically, she is male. I just agreed with you. Dimorphically, she is male. And now I'm a racist, and you called me a bigot for saying what you agreed to. And my head is just blowing up left and right because of that.
Let's get back. So I think
and then you want to change that topic.
I think this somewhat heated conversation is good. I think these are the kind of discussions that are actually interesting.
And then you have to change definitions.
We might both get canceled out of this. I don't know, but
then you want to change definitions in order to keep these two trains from bashing into each other.
We change definitions all the time.
That is such a progressive.
Context.
That is such a progressive way of getting out of a losing argument, which is let's change definitions and jump over here.
So let's get back to here's the fundamental, okay? I think that this gets us back to the fundamental point. Does gender mean anything? Does it mean anything? If you say that gender means anything, then you have to say that people can be a gender. And if you're going to say that people can be a gender, you have to at least wonder whether gender always corresponds to biological sex. So that's the question. If your position is there's no such thing as gender, then saying you're a man is as ridiculous as saying you're a transgender man. Saying you're a woman is as ridiculous as saying you're a transgender woman. Saying you're a man doesn't mean anything in the sense of gender. It only means you have a penis, the right chromosomes, that kind of thing.
From my point of view,
it only refers to your biology, the neck down. So what I'm trying to say is that reality includes our brains, includes our minds, includes our psyches. This is part of reality here, John.
Idea.
Reality isn't just my reality is my mind, my brain, my psyche. And these are meaningful things.
I cannot observe your brain.
So let's go back to
this is really important to me. I cannot observe your brain. I can interpret your actions. I can interpret your writings. You may paint something and I can interpret it. I'll get it wrong. I can never know your brain. That is between your ears, and I can never squeeze in between that. All I can do is see what's in here. I can see what I can see. I can look at your chromosomes under a microscope. I can see you're a dude. That's all.
So we're both parents.
That's the beautiful thing about identification. And in the role of government, since they're the one that issues identification, since that's one of their main jobs, is we get little passports and we get death certificates and birth certificates and driver's licenses and social security cards. One of the primary roles of government, if there is one, is to say, this guy right there is actually the same guy with all these pieces of paper. You can either give him the benefits or not give him the benefits, or give him the checking account or not give him the checking account. Oh, and look, he does have a dick, and he is this guy. And look, he does have the chromosomes. He's this guy.
I would be fine if birth certificates just said, what are your chromosomes? I'm okay with that.
Great, then put an XX
So,
or an XY. Great.
But I want to ask you about. We're
But
both
but no,
parents. Okay.
my point being that what I can see is you, and all these things say male. You're born, and it says male. It dies, and it says male, and that is an objective, factual, dimorphic thing.
So I want to push on. I want to push you on whether you think gender means anything from the perspective of parenthood, because we're both parents.
Mhm.
I have a boy who's 7 years old. You have a boy and a girl.
Mhm.
And so there's obviously stereotypes about boy and girl
Yeah.
behavior. So do you think that there's anything, is that purely socially constructed? So for example, boys are taken to be more interested in machines, mechanics, tools. Girls are taken to be more interested in dolls and social relationships. So those are the stereotypes. Do you think that those behaviors, now let's say there's enormous variation. Lots of
Yep.
boys like to play with dolls. I got my boy a doll. He played with it for like 2 minutes and then he went back to his blocks. So my boy is very stereotypical boy in that sense. But I've also met other boys who are more stereotypically feminine in certain respects. Okay, do you think that on average there's anything to those behaviors other than social construction? In other words,
How much is nature versus nurture?
Okay, is there
Yeah.
anything biological or physiological that's giving rise to some of these stereotypical behaviors?
I used to think it was much more nurture than nature until I had kids. I think a lot of us felt the same way. And then you have a boy, and then you have a girl, and you find out there's got to be some nature in there as well. That's just been my experience. I imagine there's a mixture.
So some things are clearly cultural, like do you like blue or pink? That doesn't mean anything. Do you wear a dress? I mean, even in your columns you mentioned a dress. Dress is purely cultural. In some cultures, you wear a kilt or you wear a loincloth, whatever. In our culture, I'm wearing a male uniform, the jacket, button-up shirt. But you know what? A woman could wear this exact same outfit and perfectly acceptable in our culture. My boy, by the way, likes these books about Mary Walker, who's a Civil War hero, a surgeon. She got in trouble. She actually got thrown in jail once because she insisted on wearing pants. She didn't want to wear a dress. She wanted to wear pants.
Right.
But is there anything? There's nothing in nature that says pants are male and dresses are female. That is purely cultural. So to arrest Mary Walker because she's wearing pants is, we agree, absurd and oppressive.
I believe in evolution, in that I think evolutionary traits tend to pop out. I believe that women tend to be more nurturing, and I think those who are, their traits tend to survive better. I find myself loving to watch my kids eat. It's the weirdest damn thing. And I'm there watching my kids eat, and it gives me pleasure. And it's like, this is an evolutionary thing. When you're watching your kids eat, you go, oh. And there was some parent who did not like watching his kid eat, and that kid died. And so they didn't pass it along. So I think there are some things that are evolutionary, and they might have gone along with the genders or the sex. I don't know.
So I think implicitly, you're going to eventually argue yourself into something like my position. Because I don't think you really believe that there's no such thing as gender. And this will put us at odds, like I mentioned, with certain queer theorists and queer theory activists. Because we're saying there is something biological to gender.
Then where does that put us?
Which is a very conservative position in a certain respect.
Right? Then where does that put us when it comes to our belief in free speech? Where does that put us with our die-hard, at least my die-hard belief, that other people should not take our speech, that we have a right to express how we want to express ourselves? And what I see now in a real cancel culture, I'm not talking about the Denver Post canning me, who the hell cares? I'm talking about kids being told they can't express themselves the way they want to express themselves.
And I think I share some concerns with you. Well, let me back up on free speech. The First Amendment applies to government. Government cannot censor
But it's also a societal.
So yeah, we're talking
it's a societal construct that
in the context of school. I think we share a lot of the same sympathies here. I worry about people in positions of authority public school teachers, administrators at school, who are using that authority to promote a particular social political agenda. I, with you, worry about these things. So, for example, I think it's a big problem if teachers are communicating or explicitly telling or getting kids to say that all the white kids are oppressors and privileged and all the black kids are victims and are victims of systemic oppression and racism. That's a real problem that's a real problem, okay? And I think that that does happen. At the same time, I also think that it does happen that school teachers teach real history about the racial oppression in this country, and there is real history along those lines. And I think that's also important.
You saw the show
the
that
same,
we did with Aaron Lee,
right?
whose kid and she were told that the kid was asked to stay after for art club. Both mom and daughter were told, stay after for art club, which turned out to be not an art club, but I'll call it what it was, a trans indoctrination session. They were lied to by the school district. That is criminal and ugly.
So is any 12-year-old girl, look, is any 12-year-old girl confused about her body, unsure what's going on? Newsflash, that every 12-year-old girl, every 12-year-old boy is confused about their body, about what's going on. They're being flushed with hormones, with social changes, with these new social relationships.
When government lies, even on whatever level, it is the underpinning of a society. We expect that the government is the arbiter of some basic truth. This is a stupid analogy. When CDOT didn't want people driving on a road because they didn't want much traffic on it, they said it was closed for repair or something when it wasn't. Tiny little white lie. But this is when North Korea starts. This is when you start realizing, oh, we can change people's behavior by flipping switches. It's dangerous crap.
I share these sympathies, but let me look at the other side of the coin, right? It's also dangerous crap when you have religious conservatives stripping libraries of all books about LGBTQ issues.
Agreed.
Like this book, Queer: A Graphic History, perfectly acceptable in a high school library. Would I read it to my 7-year-old? He's not even ready for the concepts, right? So no, on those grounds. It's also a problem. It's equally a problem to strip out LGBTQ issues from
right, give a school choice.
It's also a problem to say, oh, you're gay, you can't be a teacher because you're a groomer, you're a pedophile, which some Colorado conservatives have said. And that is outrageous, it is bigoted, it is morally wrong, it is offensive, and you should denounce it. That's equally a problem. So in fact, that's a much greater problem. That stuff is a much greater problem than the stuff you're talking about. And so I concede. You'll see some people who say, well, there's nothing at all to this social contagion theory of transgenderism, of some kids saying they're transgender because their friends are saying it. I think it's pretty likely that some kids who are saying they're transgender are doing that because their friends are saying that, and it gives them a social network, and they feel awkward, and they don't have any friends, and they're not able to relate to people. And so what does this give them? Oh, I'm now bisexual or transgender, whatever it is, gender fluid. What does that give you? It gives you an immediate community. It gives you sympathetic adults who are saying, oh, you need special access to my mentoring or whatever. You get this community of kids who are all, they become this oppressed club. They can say that they're oppressed, but also they're part of this community that's fighting back against the oppression. You can see how this would appeal to some kids, and I think that this does explain why some children say they're transgender. I don't think they're authentically transgender. I think that they're going to grow up and be 25 and they're going to be like, yeah, that was an interesting phase, and now I'm past that phase. And there's a lot of queer theorists who will cancel me, who will call me out for saying things like that.
Yeah, but it's also dangerous.
But there also are authentically transgender kids. There are authentically gay kids who are now facing persecution from the conservative right. And that is the bigger problem.
Which is dwindling and dwindling and dwindling. What do you...
Well, you're right that in the sense that it's dwindling and that they're losing all elections in this state.
And I'm sorry, I just don't see the threat of this conservative right. The gay movement continues to grow. Gay acceptance continues to...
Here's two problems, okay? Problem number one, a 12-year-old girl confused about what's going on with her body goes to school and she is indoctrinated and told she's transgender because she's confused about who she is, and pushed into the system. That's problem number one. Here's problem number
Push
two.
into what system?
Into this like transgender. She's basically convinced that he's transgender, even when that has no real basis in reality. Okay, that's problem number one. Problem number two, there is a kid who is transgender, who, like, whatever it is, it's a boy who likes to dress up in dresses and play with dolls and do all the stereotypically girl things. And his father beats the shit out of him because he doesn't want his kid to grow up to be a gay kid or a transgender kid. That's problem number two. Which of those is the more serious problems, John? I would submit to you that problem number two is the much more serious problem, and that is the more widespread problem in today's culture. And we both know it.
Actually, we don't both know it, because I'll submit that problem number two happens a whole lot less now than it did back when we were kids. Why?
agree. I can see.
Because I've got friends and I got cousins and I've got people I know who were that kid back then. And I've got a cousin who's like, where the hell were the clubs when I was going through it? I had to come out to my military father, who beat the hell out of me back when I did. There were no gay clubs back then. No, it's a much better time now than it ever was. In fact, I think we're hurting so many more kids who are getting this pushed down their throats when they're confused. And now we're taking people and we're forcing them to say things they don't believe in. I think it's a dangerous time. In fact, the amount of kids who are suicidal now because they're confused and getting more confused by it. I worry that we're doing too much harm to kids than helping kids. And now we're putting people and forcing them to say things they don't believe in. I think it is a dangerous time. All right,
Well,
we need to wrap this up.
Okay.
All right. Nothing like two straight guys arguing about this stuff. But the point being, from my point of view, it's just that the frustration I have looking at a guy, and we both agree biologically he's a guy, but somehow when I say he's a guy, I'm a bigot. And I can't stop saying he's a guy. Unfortunately, I'm just an old, stupid white guy who's, and they'll just say, he's from a different generation. You'll have to forgive him. He's from an old generation. And everybody under me will be beaten into submission to go, hi, my name's John. He, his, him, or whatever it is. And then his kids will be beaten into submission. And then we'll have a bunch of zombies who have no spark in them. And
what I think is going to happen, I'm much more optimistic. I think we're going to get past some of the crazy on both sides. I think we're going to get to a position where we're just respectful of people and who they are.
how
and
can you
where
be
we
respectful when you
basically-
force people to speak what
like
they
I
don't
said,
believe?
I think
That is the
it's-
opposite of respect.
I think it's actually
coercion is the
a
opposite
reasonable.
of respect.
I think it's a reasonable chance that we're going to just move beyond gendered pronouns at some point. Okay, like sports. Okay, I think my strategy is, instead of having men's and women's sports, have tiers like in boxing, like weight tiers, whatever the measurements are. You're measuring actual physical characteristics instead of, whether you have a dick or a vagina. Your vagina's there. No, one thing that does is it makes sure that no guy who's under 6 feet tall can ever play professional basketball, right? So I think that we could have different categories that would make a lot more sense. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can socially engineer ourselves out of some of these problems. One of the things I'd like to see happen is just have one set of pronouns for everybody. Problem solved. Ding, 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 we all win. You're not being coerced to say your whatever pronouns, and it's not a problem. So
And this is
I
why
think that we're going to
this
be
is
able
why
to.
libertarians still live in their parents' basements, because we're just going to get rid of. We're just going to all agree to one pronoun.
I think we're going to reach a state where kids are free to experiment. Who
Kids are
cares?
free to experiment.
If a kid
There's a
wants to go
difference
through,
between
yeah.
free to experiment
Mhm.
and forced to say she, his, hers, theirs. Here's the 28 pronouns. The amount of teaching time that has been taken away from my kids to go over the gender bread man, was that it? Yes. Here's the gender bread man, where it's a bread man, but they're talking about the difference between genders and the 68 different types of genders. Teach my kid to read instead of teaching my kid the 68 genders. No, go experiment on your own time.
I'm sympathetic with that view.
No, you're not. This is coercion. This is so
Well,
anti.
I'm a homeschooler, so you can't tie me to the public school system. I mean, so that's a whole different conversation, though, right? That's how I escape. I know that I
You
would.
realize
I would
how-
have a lot of tension.
You
if
want
my
to
kid
talk
were in
about
public
white
school, so-
privilege? White privilege is homeschooling. The very privileged have the luxury, the margin to be able to have somebody at home to homeschool. That's privilege. Most parents can't afford that. You're a lucky man. The rest of us, we got to throw them to the wolves of the bigots out there who in the public school system.
Well, we're going to agree on a lot of reforms for education, so that's a different topic.
All right, we'll she, him, them later.
Yeah.
All right, for all the other bigots out there, it's a dude in a dress. Thank you.
I want to recognize we have a lot more common ground than is often perceived by outsiders.
No, I want to thank you for actually talking about this.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah.
I appreciate you.
Dimorphic species, even though if I say the dimorphic male, I'm a bigot. God help me, somebody. Thank you, Ari.
Have a good one.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.